Bigfoot, 50% reality, 50% fiction, but 100% American. Oh, and Canadian, I guess, whatever. Yes, this ape-man has become a staple of American and Canadian culture, from movies to TV shows to monster trucks. Yet, where did it all start? It makes sense to start the Bigfoot craze with the Ray Wallace footprints in 1958, which is where the name Bigfoot comes from. Or maybe in 1929 when J.W. Burns collected stories of Native Americans and coined the term Sasquatch from the Salish word Sasquatch, which means wild man. Yet if you look even deeper into American and Canadian history, you'll find even more sightings of giant hairy people. Some were rediscovered during the Bigfoot craze of the 1960s, while others were just folk tales passed down through the years. Either way, these stories stand out among cryptozoologists due to their time in which they happened. So sit back as I tell some tales of old. That's right, LIEF ERIKSON, the real first European to land in North America. He saw Bigfoot. Well, kind of. According to the book Saga of Eric the Red, written sometime in the 13th century, ERIKSON and his men encountered people which he described horribly ugly, hairy, swarthy, and with great black eyes. They emitted horrible howls and were afraid of the conqueror's livestock. Wow, if LIEF ERIKSON saw Bigfoot, then it must be real, huh? Well, there are some things to sprinkle salt on. For one, these creatures could also talk, tried to trade with the Vikings, and were referred to as Skrellings. What, like the pharmacy guy? According to most historians, what LIEF ERIKSON described were the Thule people, and might I say that's a very unflattering description. Yeah, who knew those Vikings were mean? Also, this story might have changed over the years. I said this came from the saga of Eric the Red, but that doesn't mean it was written by ERIKSON. In fact, despite the name, the saga was about a different Viking named... Oh hell no, I'm not saying that. However, it did go into detail about ERIKSON. Also, the story was told differently depending on which version you read. There's the 14th century manuscript called... or the 15th century manuscript called... Point is, you should take the story with an ounce of salt. Moving on. January 8th, 1811, explorer David Thompson was crossing the Rocky Mountains when he stumbled across large tracks in the snow. It was 14 by 18 inches, and the hunters who accompanied him refused to pursue the tracks, fearing that they were no match for whoever made them. While this really isn't a sighting, it is still significant as it's the first Sasquatch tracks ever found. Or was it? Thompson also noted that the footprints had claws, but he ruled it out as a bear because of the ball of the foot and the massive size of it. Now, it could be that the prints melted and made the tracks look bigger, but we don't have a time machine, so who knows. September 22nd, 1818, near Ellensburg, New York. The exterior watchman chronicled a sighting of a man, describing him as an animal resembling a wild man of the woods. The creatures saw the eyewitness and booked it into the woods. While hundreds of people tried looking for the monster, they couldn't find anything. Was this made up? Probably. But regardless, this was the first newspaper article written about any kind of large hairy ape-man. June 3rd, 1896, in Gallipolis, Ohio, the Minnesota Weekly Record published a story about a man and his daughter who were traveling by carriage through the woods when they were attacked by a wild man. They described him as naked, covered in hair, and gigantic. The beast grabbed the man and pinned him to the ground, attempting to bite him. That's when the daughter grabbed the rock and bashed the monster's brains in. Though it didn't kill him, it caused him to flee into the woods. Many have called this the first sighting of the Grassman, the Ohio Bigfoot, but some have said that this is merely a robbery gone wrong, and that wild man during this time meant rugged hermits who lived in the woods. 1870, from the Antioch Ledger, an outdoorsman was camping near Orestimba Peak, what is with these names? Oregon, when a 5-foot, broad-shouldered, hairy man emerged from behind a bush. He seemed fascinated by his fire. He grabbed the stick from the fire and swung it around to amuse himself. Then he walked away, but not before another hairy creature joined him, only this one was female. Now, the unnamed man believed the creatures to be escaped gorillas, but many Bigfoot enthusiasts cite this as one of the first Bigfoot encounters in the Pacific Northwest. Now, I couldn't find an exact date for this next one, nor could I find any newspapers to back it up. However, I still find it fascinating. It was the early 19th century, and a stagecoach of people were making their way around Glatsbury Mountain when the driver was forced to stop due to a washed-out road. That's when he noticed a large footprint in the mud. Then, suddenly, something attacked the coach. The people inside were able to escape before the assailant knocked over the carriage. The stagecoach riders only saw a pair of eyes staring back at them, followed by a roar and something rushing into the woods. July 4th, 1884. The Daily Colonist publishes an article titled, "What is it? A strange creature captured above Yale, a British Columbian gorilla." According to the article, a group of men captured a strange creature which was described as a 5-foot gorilla standing on both legs. However, in the weeks to come, the Mainland Guardian would write a critical article about the Jacko affair. Yeah, that's what it's called, Jacko. Claiming that the incident never happened and the Daily Colonist was duped into publishing a fake story. Then, the British Columbian reported that 200 people went to see the supposed gorilla man, only to discover a regular man at his place. It would seem that the story was a hoax, but it's important to talk about because several TV shows such as In Search Of would feature the story as authentic, and cryptozoologists would vouch for the story's authenticity too. August of 1895, in Winston, Connecticut, the Winston Herald published a report of a large man, stark naked and covered with hair all over his body. One eyewitness was selectman Riley Smith, who, while picking berries with his bulldog, like a man, he was frightened by the beast. 2 other men saw the beast as well, and it was quickly theorized that the wild man was none other than Arthur Beckman, a mental patient who escaped Litchfield Sanatorium. It wouldn't be until July of 1972 that the creature was seen again. This might be cutting it close to the 1929 date, but I still want to talk about it because it's one of the most famous Bigfoot sightings. A prospector named Albert Ostman had an encounter with a Sasquatch. Though this supposedly happened in 1924, Ostman didn't tell anyone about the story until the mid-1960s. According to Ostman, he awoke one night to find himself being carried off by a Sasquatch. He was brought to a family of Sasquatches, where the giants kept him prisoner for 6 days. He only escaped by feeding snuff to the head honcho Sasquatch. While the Bigfoot was trying to get the taste of cancer out of his mouth, Ostman ran away and made it back to civilization. Last but not least, what I think is the scariest Bigfoot encounter. Before Mount St. Helens exploded, it was a frequent place for campers and miners. One place in particular was Ape Canyon. Why was it called Ape Canyon? Because in mid-July of 1924, a group of miners were attacked by what they described as ape-men. Beforehand, they heard strange noises coming from the woods and found tracks that they couldn't identify. Then, when getting water from a spring, they saw a 7-foot tall creature with blackish fur. They shot at the creature and ran back to their cabin. That night, the cabin was pelted by rocks. The men awoke to find their cabin surrounded by ape-men. One of them even tried reaching into the cabin and grabbing an axe. The sound of gunfire scared them away though. The miners left the next morning. This incident was published in the Oregonian on July 16th, 1924. Skeptics have claimed that these men were simply harassed by youths from a local YMCA camp, which would mean that one of these kids got shot and nobody reported it. Maybe pass it off as a snake bite. Well, there you have it. 10 sightings of Bigfoot before the big guy got his stardom. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other sightings of wild men across the United States in the 19th century. And that's not even covering the modern sightings. So I might do a sequel to this. We'll see. This has been Cryptid Quest.